Welcome to the Sons of Mjolnir podcast.
The Sons of... what?
This isn't your Sons of Macaroni, yeah!
The Sons of Mjolnir?
This is Sons of Mjolnir, yeah!
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Sons of Mjolnir. As always, I am one of your hosts, Fat Thor, and I am once again joined by my great friend Sean Mott from the Metalcore Nerds podcast, and we are coming back to do another episode of the Beyond Invincible after show, talking all about Invincible episode 2. Sean, welcome back. Thank you so much for doing this again with me.
Man, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. Can't wait to talk more Invincible. This show is amazing.
Yes, sir. Greatest superhero show in the universe. And I really love this episode. We talked about episode 1 last week. And I mean, episode 1 was just explosive. If you know what I mean, like I can't really think of a better word for it. And I think really set the tone for this season. But I think that this episode, we kind of dig deeper into all of the things like we talked about in episode 1, where we see Mark dealing with his guilt over what happened with Omni-Man and, you know, his fears of becoming like Omni-Man. So before we get into all the nitty gritty nerdy stuff, Sean, just overall thoughts. What were your thoughts of episode 2?
When I first started on rewatch, we talked about this last week. We both watched like the first 4 episodes like in a chunk, so they kind of all blended together of like what happened in which episode. So as I was rewatching, I was like, "Oh, it's this episode." I don't remember much happening in this episode. And then as I was watching, I was like, "Oh, never mind. So much happens in this episode."
Literally,
it's another really great episode. It does cover a lot of ground, and it plants some good seeds for what's to come for sure. But yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm with you 100% on, like you said, I was just rewatching it before we hopped on here. And when we're getting into full spoilers in this episode, so it doesn't really matter anyway. But when I was remembering this, all I could remember and think of was the Atlantis part and like the scenes in Atlantis.
That was the same thing I did.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, that was the whole episode. And I'm watching it back. I'm like, oh my God, there is so much in this episode that I completely forgot about. But let's start it off. I want to kind of start this off with like we talked about in last week's episode and we mentioned briefly just now. We get a really great scene in the beginning of this episode with Mark and Debbie, where Mark is talking to Debbie and basically, you know, she's telling him how he needs to take a break from the superhero, like he's, you know, doing too much. And it all comes back to, like we talked about last week, like his guilt over the people that were killed in the attack from Omni-Man, and specifically like what happened in Chicago. And Debbie tells him, she's like, you're not going to end up like your father. And like Mark kind of like freaks out. Like he's like, why would you even say that? Like if you said it, that means it's true. And I just thought I really love this scene because I think, again, it goes back to what we were talking about with going deeper into Mark's fears and like the guilt that he feels from season 1, which is a very important theme that, you know, will come into play moving forward. And I gotta say too, like coming from the comic book side of it, like this is definitely something that is dealt with in the books, but I would say it's more of a background theme. So like last week when Mark when all the Maulers get killed, right? And the Guardians come and they find Mark. In the book, that's very much like kind of brushed over. Like Mark's like, oh my, like he says in the book, like, oh, I don't think the Maulers like really deserved this either, like, you know, getting killed. But then it's just kind of like, okay, back to business. But in the show, we see he's like, not again, like freaking out. And I think it translates to here with this conversation with Debbie. Again, they're bringing his guilt and his fears to the forefront as opposed to in the background. And I think that is just such a great, not necessarily even a change, but just makes the story flow a lot better. And I just rambled for like a minute or so. So Sean, give me your thoughts on this conversation with Debbie. What do you think?
No, I love that. And there's a great parallel to it at the end of the episode too, a little bit where he kind of sees his mom's perspective from everything too. But yeah, like you said, I'm really glad they dive deeper this in the show than they do in the comics. I think it's one of the best parts of this first half of the second season, just seeing him deal with the ramifications of what happened. And there's so many times, especially in this episode, I believe there's like twice where someone brings something up and they apologize to him because in direct effect of that finale. And like we said last week, like the finale is such the biggest catalyst for the season for everything that happens. But it's, you know, like they're even in the treehouse, like in Eve's, you know, house she built out in the woods, and celebrating graduating from high school. And you know, she's like, oh, I'm gonna go help clean up Chicago, and she's like, I'm sorry. And
Mm-hmm.
then once we get to the Atlanteans thing, when, you know, they bring up that they killed the king of Atlantis, who was in the OG Guardians of the Globe, and you know, Cecil's like, oh, I'm sorry. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a constant thing. It's very short and small, but it's like it's obviously said there on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, people have to say these things, but then they're like, oh, we know how he feels about this stuff, so they feel the need to apologize about it. And you know, even in that treehouse, he's just like, yep, I'm on call. And they're like, you're always on call. And he's like, yeah, I need to make up for what I did, you know, maybe make
Mm-hmm.
up for what happened. He just has this weight on his shoulders to just prove that he's not Omni-Man. And
Yeah.
it's great, and it's all leading up to something that's like very massive. And you know, I just, this show is so good. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy how people can talk about like animation. It's I wish it was like respected a little more. I think it is getting there to
Mm-hmm.
an extent, but you can tell stories in any type of medium, you know. And this is one of the best in animation that's telling a really good story, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think, as someone who, like, don't get me wrong, I love animation, but I'm not like into anime. Like, I wouldn't say I'm not into anime. Like,
Mm.
I enjoy it. I just, and people listening, and especially my friends back home, like my buddy Brandon, that will listen to this, he's gonna start laughing because it's just, I haven't done my homework. And I always say this, it's like I need to really like get into it and like really find one that, captures me. But I think, as far as like Western media goes, these especially superhero kind of animated shows, Invincible not only is the best, but I think it's really opening people's eyes to not only what can be done in
Right.
animation, but the level of storytelling that you can do in animation. And I think another point that we kind of talked about last week, the use of the violence and the use of showing violence, I think
Uh,
helps in that regard, because you'll have people that maybe don't know about Invincible and are like, oh, it's animated, like that's for kids, like cartoons are for kids or whatever. But then they see Immortal getting his head blown up, then it's like, oh wait, maybe this
yeah.
isn't for kids, you know what I mean?
Perfect example for an anime you should get into. It just ended. Attack on Titan.
Dude, I know. That's
It's,
one that so Attack on Titan, Yu Yu Hakusho, I've actually watched a little bit of and I enjoy. Cowboy Bebop, they're all on my list.
Attack on Titan is very violent, very adult. It's like the Game of Thrones of anime.
That's the one with like the huge, like freaky
Yeah.
mouth people, right? Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
I've watched not a good, a lot of it, but again, shout out my friend Brandon. He's actually kind of the fourth member of the Sons of Mjolnir podcast. He helps me with a lot of, the background stuff.
Awesome.
But he was my roommate for years and years, and he's all into the anime and stuff. So I would watch, peeking in, seeing what he's
Yeah.
watching. I watched a couple Attack on Titans. I just remember being like, dude, what is going on in here? And like I said, I was into it for sure, but it's just like, I don't know what's going on, but this is cool.
Yeah. It's one of the best stories I think ever told. Like it is
And it
unreal.
and
Has
it just
probably
ended.
the craziest plot twist I've ever seen in anything. Like
Damn.
it is jaw dropping.
Damn.
it's
Well, shit. Well, I'll tell you what
it's
I
good.
told Brand, what I've been telling Brandon for the past 4 years. It's on the list.
Good. 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 As long as it's on the list.
Oh yeah,
I
it's
just say
on the
like
list.
knowing the stuff you like, I think that would be a good gateway drug
Oh,
into anime. It's like
let's.
so well written, and the like when you look back at season one from where it ends, you're like, how did we even get here?
What
It's
even
so
happened?
insane, dude.
Hey, well,
It's
like
it's
we
awesome.
talked about, man. Hey, if I find the hours in the day, I am 100%. I'm
Right.
I'm 100% down to nerd out on some Attack on Titan. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
between comic books and all these comic book shows, man, it's hard to find the time to fit in the anime as well. I can
Yeah, for sure.
I struggle even fitting in DC books because I read so much freaking
No.
Marvel. Ugh, but we could talk with that, could be a whole nother topic of conversation for another
I know.
episode. But we got to get back. Let's get back to Invincible. So, you mentioned it perfectly, and this is another thing I wanted to bring up. The cleanup in Chicago. So we have Eve and all of them are in their little treehouse, and she mentions, like you were talking about, how she's joining this cleanup crew in Chicago. And later on in the episode, we see her go there, and she helps out this family and all this stuff. But we find in the end that it might not have really been such a good thing. And I want to get your thoughts on this first, Sean. What did you think about Eve's cleanup in Chicago? Because I really thought this scene and this whole kind of little subplot was very interesting for me.
Yeah, it was like nice because you saw, like the people being so thankful for her and, like her getting past the red tape and like actually making a difference. And you find out that there was a reason nothing was done with the spot that she totally redid. And it's hard. And it also sucks because it gave more fuel to her dad's fire, who is
Mm.
possibly the worst dad. He is
Yeah, he's a
awful.
shit.
Especially if you've watched the Adam Eve special, it gives you more hate for that dude. Like,
I
oh,
gotta I
he
gotta
is
be honest, I still have not
awful,
watched that, if I'm being completely
dude.
honest. I know it's
It's
one of those things.
so good.
So it came out when I was at Comic-Con, when I was at San Diego, and I was just so swamped with stuff, like I didn't have time to
Right,
watch that, and then I just completely forgot about it. And then when
dude.
this season started, which obviously since we're doing this show, like, we're covering the second
Right.
season, so I got sucked into season 2, and then I remember like, oh shit, there's an Adam Eve special on here. I didn't even watch this yet.
It's great. It's like a great just like origin story for her and just adds so much more context to who she is as like a person and a hero. And
Okay.
it's great. I can't recommend it highly enough.
I I
It's
do have
so
to
good. I went back right after and rewatched season 1
Oh,
directly
okay.
after.
Then I'm watching it for sure tonight. I do have to say though, so in the book, I gotta just show you guys this. I think I showed it off in episode 1, but this is the compendium for
Big guy.
Invincible. Yeah, this big, all my little. So for all you out there that are curious, I won't show what is written on the tabs, but this is the like pretty much the information we're working with for this season 2 here. So all about this
Oh
chunk of it.
wow.
So like this
All
is
right.
season 1, season 2, and I'm guessing this. So it's like this is only there's 3 compendiums. This is the
Yeah.
first one, and we're getting at almost 3 seasons out of just the first one. Like
Right.
we have so much to get to. But besides that little rant, so I'm reading it in the compendium format, and I've read it before. But what they do in the compendium, and there's single issues of this as well, there's origin issues like laid throughout. So like
Oh,
there's
okay.
there's an Invincible issue 0 in there that kind of goes over Mark's origin. There's Adam Eve one, there's one for Monster Girl, all sorts of stuff.
Oh,
So after I saw well, I didn't watch it yet, but saw that it came out, the Adam Eve special, it got me thinking. I think it would be really cool if, like, in between seasons, we got more of these kind of specials, and they just kind of
that'd be
play
awesome.
as like the origin issues do in the book. I think that would be super cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. I would love that. I
Yeah.
would love that so much.
And I think that
Yeah.
they have, I mean, I know Kirkman said that the wait from season 2 to season 3 will be a lot less than it was from
Yes.
1 to 2, but I think that there's still time in there to, like I said, throw a couple specials. And the world is so
Yeah.
big that I think we could do a lot of specials for that.
There's so many characters. You
Yeah,
could easily
a
do
hundred
it.
percent. But going back to Eve though in Chicago, I like, again, I just really liked this little subplot that they have going on, because I think it just goes to the strength of not only the show Invincible, but the comic Invincible as well. And like one of the reasons why people enjoy it so much and why I enjoy it is it's kind of a more realistic look at the superhero, or like the
For sure.
world of superheroes, similar to The Boys. I would say The Boys
Right.
does a great job with this as well.
100%.
And with this little subplot, I just really enjoyed it because it's, I think, really harkens on that theme of like being a superhero is great, saving people is great, but sometimes that comes at a cost, and sometimes there's a cost to saving people and doing what you perceive as good. So for Eve,
Right.
she's fixing these people's apartment and everything, and like, yeah, that's great, but she doesn't. And the construction worker even says, she's like, how do I know this is up to code? It's like, yeah, she doesn't know building codes and shit. Like, she can make things,
Right.
but how does she know it's, structurally stable? And then we
Right.
see that the park is not, and it's like built on a sinkhole. So again, it's like it's a small thing in the episode, and again, more of like a subplot. But I think again, it just kind of shows it's a good example of, like I said, to me, what Invincible really is about. And it's like this more realistic superhero world. And it's like, yeah, in a real world with real superheroes, shit like that probably would happen all the time. Like
Right. For
they
sure.
try and fix something, but they're like, oh, like, I don't know, this company bought this building or whatever it is. There's a lot
Yeah.
of red tape and shit that goes with that stuff.
A lot of logistics going on.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I really love that. And with Eve's dad too, he is such a shit. But I will say, not in defense of him, because like fuck him. And I'm sure after I watch this Eve special, I'm gonna be like, oh, I take back everything I said.
Oh
But I
God.
do think it is an interesting dynamic though, and kind of going back to the realness of superheroes. It's like he doesn't want shit from her powers, right? Like he's, salt of the earth, blue
Very
collar kind of
proud.
guy, proud guy, right? And I think that again, in real life, that would be a very real dynamic that people would experience. And like I think it kind of goes to almost kind of an ethical question. It's like, yeah, I have these powers and I can just make gold, but do I deserve to have that, right? And I think that's where her dad's coming from, which I think
Right.
is a very realistic kind of emotion and or thought to have.
For sure. I mean, she even says that. Like
Mhm.
to add to your point, she even
Mhm.
says like, I get it. You've worked to provide for this family your whole
Yeah,
life,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
want to
Mhm.
continue to do so. Like, I get it. Um, it's just like I just think there's some middle ground they could both reach. You know what I mean? That would help out everyone.
Yeah.
And he's just so mean to her, and I hate that.
Yeah, he is just mean. Like you said, I think that while I think he has points, not the way to go about it for sure.
No.
And I am very curious to see if we're going to see more of her family going forward, because they were even
I'm
in
sure.
season 1 a little bit. Like again, not like
Yeah.
major players, but I don't know. I really love that dynamic, and I'm interested to see like where that goes. Like, will the dad come around? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
While it's a small part of the show, I'm like invested in Eve and her
Same.
family life for sure.
Yeah, it's just like such a testament to her to have such a father who is like that, and
Hmm.
the mom is very like submissive to the whole thing. She obviously loves Eve, but it's like whatever he says goes, kind of household.
Hmm.
And to see how like caring and kind she is as a human is just more of a testament to her, that she like overcame all of that being treated so harshly, and is the way she is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then I want to talk. So there's a couple bigger things in this episode that we've talked a little bit about, but that I want to get to. But really quickly, I want to bring up Livingston, the Martian astronaut guy. It's super goofy. Like I already love him just for his goofiness, but that was one thing that I was like, oh shit, I forgot that happened with the whole what are their names? Siglies or something like that. That little alien.
The Martians, whatever
Yeah,
they
but
are,
I'm talking
yeah.
like I'm gonna call them Starros just because that's what they are basically. But the
Oh,
like
yeah, 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 yeah.
mind control little things.
Yeah,
So I loved, which again we'll get into more of like what that will be later on. This is just very like basic introduction to the Shapesmith, if you would. But yeah, I enjoyed the inclusion of that here, because again, we talked
yeah,
about
me
this
too.
last week. Like the comic is all over the place compared to the show. Like what they pull from the show isn't necessarily like from the same issue. So when they brought in the Martian and Shapesmith, I was super excited that we're getting into them already. But what did
Yeah,
you think about the shapes? Again, were you kind of like me, like, oh shit, I forgot that Martian shit even happened?
a little bit, yeah, because it is kind of like they pack so much in these episodes, and it is kind of
Hmm.
like a side plot, but it's kind of like Mark's like first big mission by himself.
Hmm.
Obviously, goes to space,
Yeah.
and I'd like that it's like a cool tie to season one. Like it's it's a thing that you could have thought would have just been like a one and done thing, but no, it's playing a factor in the future, which I like. It's small, intricate stuff like that I really love, and I love how weird he acts because he's obviously not human, and he's trying his best to like act human, and just him being like don't kill me when he gets fired, to be an
Yeah.
astronaut. And,
They're like, we're
you
not
know,
gonna kill you. He's like, what? You're not?
yeah, and when he sees like the Guardians headquarters, and he's like, "Look at these perfectly normal
Hmm.
things," and stuff like that. It's just so funny, and I love when he tells like his like origin human story, but then
Yeah.
it shows like what happened of how he got there in
Hmm.
reality as he's telling the story. I thought that was incredible. And I think just like the whole shapeshift or shapesmith thing is just like a play on how like dumb comic book names are, which I
Yeah.
think like that's like a lot of Invincible. It's the same with the
Mhm.
boys. They're both like very meta commentaries on the superhero genre as a whole, but they were done in like the 2000s or whatever. So they kind of did it before like meta commentary was like super cool, I guess.
Mhm.
But they can just plan it even more now because it's the way the superhero genre is. There's so much more to play with.
Oh yeah.
It's such a big thing in the pop culture mythos. So it's like these shows are ripe for the ripe for the picking and that stuff. But yeah, he's such a fun character. I can't wait to see how he kind of plays in. I thought he was going to turn into like just like the guy like Martian Man.
That's
I
what
thought
I
he was just
thought
going to
too.
turn into him
Mhm.
and just try to be like the next him, which I guess he kind of is just in human form. I'm just interested to see where it goes. And it's
Yeah.
even funny how he's like they said he's gonna get kicked out of his house, and then he goes and shows up and helps the Guardians and being like, "Oh, you all live here?" Like even that's like a small little thing where he's trying to find a place to live that's like
Yeah.
free.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, I really enjoy the Shapesmith character. He's so goofy, and
So good.
like going back to what you were saying about him like trying to act human when he's like when the landlord comes to his door, he's eating a frozen pizza, but just like frozen, just
Frozen.
eating it. Yeah. But yeah, I'm really excited to see where that's going to go. Like I know where it's going to go. If you read the comic, you know where it's going to go. But
Right.
again, talking about how they mix things together, like is
Right.
that something we're even going to get this season? Maybe they leave it for next
Long
season.
burn kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, or it could, they could just do a whole episode with the Martians and all that stuff. Like I don't really want to spoil it, which I'm gonna be full disclosure. This isn't in the episodes that we have seen, so like I'm not, being like, oh, maybe we'll see it. We haven't seen that, but again, I'm just talking like how the comic is laid out. That could either be it could be a episode or it could be a couple different episodes with the whole Martian thing. But
Right.
all that stuff that happened in season one will come back for sure. That's what I'll say. But yeah, again, that's something that I love about the show adaptation of this comic series is like I'm saying how they mix storylines together and it makes it almost I don't want to say better, but it's like a little more cohesive, right? Like the way that they lay it out and like you said they put so much in these episodes. So just we did this last week, I'll do it again this week. So for episode 2 we're dealing with, and again there might be a little things from some other issues, but mainly what we're dealing with in this episode is issue 15, 17, and 21. And then we also get a little sprinkling of issue 40 in there as well. So that gives you just kind of an idea of like how much we're moving things around and like
That's just this episode.
that's just this episode.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's wild.
This episode deals with 4 different issues.
Wow.
And like I said, while some of them are just kind of little sprinkled ideas, some of them the entire so like the Atlantis
It's
section
like an
of this
issue.
episode, that's issue 15. And
Right.
then the Darkwing stuff, that's issue I
Mm.
think 21. It like so we're getting almost 3 or 4 issues of content with each episode that we're getting. And again, just the way that they do it, I think is so smart and just so it's so cool to see how they do it. Cause again, they're not changing the story. It's just laid
Yeah.
out a little differently and it just makes it flow so nicely. And again, you would think with mix matching all this stuff it would be like all jumbled, right? But it flows so smoothly
Well, it's so
and the
great. Yeah.
storyline, and I think again going back to I think it helps with highlighting these themes that we're talking about, like Mark's guilt
Sure.
and all that stuff. With moving around certain things, I think it helps bring those themes to the forefront without having to change the story.
Yeah, 100%. I would love to see this like after a season's over if like Kirkman showed his like roadmap and how he decided to like place things where and stuff. Like I
Hmm.
would love that.
Yeah,
I doubt he would ever do it, but I would love it personally.
I
It'd
would
be
too. Like you said, I would absolutely love that because I'm so curious. Like, okay, so I'm just this is very quick thing in the episode that doesn't really mean much, so it won't be a big discussion. But I'll bring up the I forget what they're called, like the
the
lizard
Lizard
group.
League.
Yeah, Lizard League. Yeah, so the Lizard League doesn't come into play. The basically the scene that we see in this episode, that's from issue 40. And so like I said, and then the Atlantis stuff, that's issue 15. So
Right.
again, I'm curious, like if I'm Kirkman, right? It's like I'm doing this episode and I include, and so like 15, 17, and 21. So like all around kind of the same
Same. Yeah.
area. But then you got issue 40 stuff. It's like, why did you decide to bring in the Lizard League
It
now? Right?
has to be building to something, and I
That's,
thought this. I
yeah.
wrote, like, a note being like, "Lizard League, is this building to something?"
Mm-hmm.
Because they're mentioned or included in season 1 very briefly as well, and I think they're also involved in the Adam Eve special too. So they've been sprinkled in, like, every, form of Invincible
Mm-hmm.
content that's come out. Like, it has to be building to something, and like we said, like, we didn't think the Martian thing was gonna play a factor, and then here it is. It's kind of like a not like a big plot point, but I mean, he's involved with the Guardians of the Globe. That's like a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So, and Kirkman's like a kind of a genius. You know what I mean? Like
I think
he's
he is a
doing this stuff
genius,
on
not
purpose.
kinda.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, 100%. But he's doing this stuff on purpose, he's,
Oh
like,
yeah.
laying seeds t for something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what, because they seem like you said, like, villain of the week kind of thing. Like, they seem so much like a villain of the week type thing, because 'cause they're always they even go, "Yeah, send out the Guardians of the Globe. They can't beat the Lizard League, then what are they doing? They should just give up."
Yeah.
Like, they're seen as, like, the lowest of the low villains,
Mm-hmm.
So I am wondering to what is it building to? Because they seem like such a non-threat, but they're obviously being included for some reason,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I'll say from the comics, they definitely do play a role later on,
Okay,
and
makes sense.
but again, it's like one of those things. Like, will we get to that this season? I don't know. Like how
I feel
they're
like
playing things out. This could be
I
just
think
like
this
a
is gonna be
thread.
a major, like, leading thing. Like, there'll be, like, little snippets
Yeah.
for, like,
But
ever. That's yeah.
that's the thing is like, okay, again, coming from the comic book side, right? It's like we have just in these two episodes, we have been introduced to such big plot points from the
Right.
book, like with Angstrom Levy and the
Yeah.
Mars stuff, and then now the Lizard League, which I don't necessarily say the Lizard League's like hugely important, but I mean they're involved. They're involved in a big event, right? Like that's what I'll
Okay,
say.
okay,
In
okay,
like they're involved in this big event in the comics. So again, it's like
okay.
we have, at least from my mind, there's at least like three or four big events, which one we do get to, which we'll talk about in future episodes. But again, I'm just like, how are we going to fit this in four more episodes? Right. So it's like, that's the question, at least for me, is like, what are we going to get to still in these last four episodes? And like, what's going to be left for season 3? Because, like I said, we're like halfway through the first compendium, and there's 2 more compendiums worth of stories left to go. So, I mean, if we're going at this rate, we get like 10 invincible seasons, more than that. I would say like there's like the sky's the limit, honestly.
Yeah. I think he said he envisioned, like, 8 to 9 seasons or something like
And
that.
that, see, I
I
could
think
see
that's what I
that.
saw.
That would
Yeah.
make sense. I think
And
8
then
to
exactly what
9.
you said, if the compendium 1 is 3 seasons, just thinking of how much it's covered,
Mhm.
then that would make sense. 3
True.
compendiums, 9 seasons,
Yeah, that does make
3 seasons
sense.
per compendium. That would make sense for sure. Especially with kind of how he's pacing things, It just
Mhm.
fit a lot, but it's not overly complicated. Like, it's all
Yeah.
like, it's like little nuggets leading to different things, and that's kind
Mhm.
of what I love about the show, and it takes turns, especially since I haven't read the comics. Like, obviously, if you read the comics, you have an idea of where things are going, obviously, because it is such a close adaptation, but, like, even the way this first half of the season, like, ends, I was like, I did not think we were going here.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay.
Well, neither
here
did
we
I.
go.
That's what I'm saying. Then that's what I think is the genius of this show. And again, we're talking about Kirkman being a genius. And I got to shout out Ryan Otley too, because I don't know how
Oh, whew.
involved he is with the show, but I mean, his art is the bait, like what makes Invincible invincible, and it's like
100%.
he's just so great. But the whole Invincible team, that's why they're so good at what they do, and like what makes this show so good is again, I know what happens in the comic, but the way in which they lay it out in the show, it's a surprise for me as well. Like I never
Cool.
really know what's gonna like those last. So we're talking episode 2 here. Episode 3 and 4, I would not have guessed like that's where we were going from
Interesting.
the first
Okay.
2 episodes, and like moving forward, it's like I don't these last 4 episodes. I really there's like 3 or 4 different ways I think it could go, and it's like as a fan while I'm it's more of like once I see it's like okay, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, right? But as far as right now, it's like they could go a bunch of different ways for it. They could leave us with a huge cliffhanger. They could leave it more kind of mundane. I mean, there's so much to get to, Sean. There's so much crazy shit coming,
You're not
dude.
wrong.
But speaking of crazy shit, and we got to bring this conversation, reel it back in a little bit. We got to talk about Darkwing because this was another great scene I thought of this episode, and I think goes back to what we were talking about again. Which this is, I'm going to warn everyone listening and watching right now. This is going to be a theme that we're going to hark on a lot, probably in this episode and future episodes. But again, going back to Mark's guilt and Mark's fear of becoming Omni-Man, and we get this great scene with the new Darkwing, and I mean he's just causing shit. He loses his brain, honestly. He like goes absolutely psycho.
Yeah.
So Mark comes in and he traps Mark in this like dark dimension sort of thing, and he calls him Omni-Man's son. He's like, I'm not gonna do some whatever for Omni-Man's son. And Mark, like, I was scared. Like I was shaking in my boots a little bit. He like grabs him by the hand. He's like, "Don't call me that." And again, just a great example of showing like he is not dealing he is not dealing with this stuff very well. Like it's very much eating at him. But Sean, I'll take it off. I'll take it away from you. What did you think about this whole scene with Darkwing and like the kind of intensity that we saw from Mark, which definitely replicates the Marks that we see in the other universe, like we talked about in season 1, where all other Marks go bad. We see a glimpse of that here. What do you think?
Yeah, I loved seeing that kind of dark side kind of come out, and it was cool because like the whole Darkwing thing was kind of like it almost felt like WandaVision in a way. He like traps this city, in this like weird kind of like a force field.
Yeah, what do they call him? The Midnight Magician. It's under a curse from the Magician, I think.
Yeah, so that was super cool to see, and then seeing him go to the Shadow Realm or whatever, and then him keeping him there, and he's like, it reminded me of Loki, and when Brad and Loki had that conversation, like, well, you said I've done terrible, horrible things, right? Like it was, but obviously he has like his is a little different because he was a villain and he's not a villain now, but same premise in a way. And I noticed this on second watch in the beginning when he's fighting like the magma mites or whatever they're called. He does the chops to like cut them in half, like his dad does to like decapitate people.
I
did
didn't
not notice
notice
until the
that.
second watch, and I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, I love
Mark.
that, Sean. A little Easter egg there. I love it.
And it was that part was him too being like, I can't hold back. I'm holding back. I can't hold back. I need to get to my graduation. But he was letting some of that darkness kind of seep out. And then you see it again here, like adding more to that of being like, and giving it to us, like the viewer is like, which way is he really going to go? You see that his heart's in the right place. But like we said, in every other universe, he goes down a very different path. So it makes it like an interesting journey to see where he's going to go with it. Like, which side is he going to take? Or is he going to find his own path where it's kind of in the middle, where, you see him kind of use, it's like a Star Wars thing. You saw Luke use the dark side to help beat the dark side and stuff like that. So there is a middle ground where you can kind of do the best of both and be kind of a balance.
Gray Jedi.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see where it goes. It's like it's another cool layer to add on to it, because even though he has that guilt and that pressure of people either saying we know you're not your dad, or people like Immortal being like, I think you are like your dad. It's
I'm
interesting to see
fucking
him
watching you.
go down that road a little. Yeah, see him go down that road a little bit. So I like that. I like there's layers and layers and layers in the show,
Mhm.
and it's really, like you said, it's one of the best out there. It's incredible. So I love seeing this, darker side of Mark. It's nice.
Yeah, like we said last week, sad boy Mark. I love seeing the kind of more dark side
Yeah,
of Mark. I think that's super interesting. And like we talked about, obviously he goes bad in every other universe. And I really, again, going back to how, great this show is, I really love how they're playing that out throughout the season and like throughout these interactions, whether they be small or big. Like that's a great shout with him chopping the magnemites. Like that's so great. And again, just another layer of maybe he is more like Omni-Man than he thinks he is, which I think is a very profound theme to play with too, of like,
yeah,
the curse of the father, right? And like generational curses. And it's like, are you like, even if you don't agree with, who your father is or whatever, can you escape that, And I
yeah,
think that's a very universal theme that a lot of people deal with, and something that's a very
for sure.
interesting thing to explore. And I think in the way that they're doing it in the show and like kind of layering it out for us, I think is so, so good.
Yeah, and it's probably where you're going next, but the stuff with the Atlanteans, you kind of see the opposite in a way. You see
Yes.
him not hold back per se, but you see him do something that his father definitely wouldn't do. And
Hmm.
he even has a conversation with Cecil. And he's like, you're right, I'm not my father, and that's why I need to do this. And it was a good kind of like parallel sides to duality of man kind of moment
Yeah.
of seeing him. Kind of adds to my point where he could be going in the path more in the middle than either
Hmm.
side, for
Yeah,
sure.
I think that goes to your point beautifully, in the sense of, like you said, we see with Darkwing, which I forget what his sidekick name
Like
was.
Night Boy or something
Yeah,
weird.
something stupid. Let's see. Yeah, Night Boy. It was Night
It
Boy.
is Night Boy. Okay,
Yeah.
I was like, was it Night Boy? I was like, that sounds way too dumb. But
Nope, yep, it's Night Boy. Going back to the names of these characters that you were mentioning earlier. But yeah, like that's an example of, like you said, like his darker side, and like him kind of giving in to the impulse of Omni-Man, if you would. But then we see almost immediately after that the flip side of that, and like the Mark Grayson side, and like why he's not like his dad, which again, kind of going back to what we're saying, is the show just does such a great job with laying those moments out to have us as the audience question, like, oh, is Mark good or is Mark bad? You know what I mean? I think they're doing just such a great job with playing with that, and I think they do an even better job of it in future episodes that, if you guys enjoy this show, you guys will find out about when we do our episodes 3 and 4. But
yes,
back to the Atlanteans, though, I think that's a perfect segue point to start talking about Atlantis and all that. So Mark goes down to Atlantis because Omni Man killed the king of Atlantis in season 1, which I didn't. I totally forgot that. Like I remember the fish dude, but I totally
yeah,
forgot that he was the king of Atlantis. I thought he's just
right.
some fish guy. So he goes down there, and then it's basically like a ritual, if you would, but it's they want revenge for Omni Man killing
Yeah,
the fish guy. And it leads to this awesome fight with Mark and the Death Dweller, which I love when we get big ass monsters in this show. We got one
so cool.
last episode with the Cyclops, and then now we get the Death Dweller. So anytime Mark gets to go up against a big monster, I'm front row and center. But Sean, again, I'll throw it off to you first. What do you think about the Atlantis scene and the ritual, or trial by combat is what they call it? The trial
Yeah,
by combat.
it was really funny because at first, Cecil was like, "Oh, you have to marry the queen."
Yeah.
Like it's a custom. If you're, since you're the next of kin, like you have to marry the queen. He goes in there, he's like, well, I have a girlfriend, so I can't really. And she's like, do you think we follow these barbaric rules anymore, and there's like, oh, it's a trial by combat, and then
Mhm.
they have this big monster, and I love the fake out where it's his like head is this cute little kind of
Yeah, that was
animal,
great.
and it's like his antenna, and then it's just like an awesome fight, like you said, an awesome like underwater uh fight, and you see him, like I said, he stops holding back, and it really gives it to this big kaiju, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
and then we see the monster get loose, and then he sees a bunch of the Atlanteans getting killed, and even though they kind of sentenced him to death in a way, he went back and saved them, which is that other side of Mark. He
Yeah.
didn't want people dying, like even if they did him wrong in a sense, like he doesn't think they deserve to die, and it just adds another wrinkle to those layers, man, and it's
So
good
good.
stuff.
Yeah, so good. And I love it too. Again, going back to the changes and whatnot from the comic book, is this scene plays out way differently in the book. So, like I said, this is from issue 15. And in the book, it is a marriage ritual. Like, so in the show,
Oh
they're
wow,
like, oh, yeah, we don't do that anymore, like, blah, blah. In the book, it is a marriage ritual, which again, I think is a
interesting,
great change, just kind of makes it more updated for,
for
today.
sure.
But what's interesting, and I think again goes back to the theme that we keep bringing up over and over again, is so in the book, like I said, it's still a marriage ritual. And there's this whole kind of thing with, so the queen has like a bodyguard, right? And the bodyguard is like in love with her, but like she won't give him the time of day. So Mark like comes up with this plan. So then he goes, so basically in the book he has to fight the Death Dweller to like earn her hand in marriage, right? So
Okay.
that's like how the fight comes about. It's not a trial by combat. But so he like punches the monster but makes it look like the bodyguard did it, and then like the bodyguard and the queen get married, and then he just kind of fucks off
Oh
and
wow.
leaves. Which is, it's a great story.
Yeah,
It's
that's funny.
funny. It's like I said, it's a great story. But I love the change they made for the show, and like how,
Yeah,
again, one, they made it a trial by combat as opposed to like a marriage ritual, which I think is just a better change.
for
And
sure.
then two, like you just said so beautifully, like the whole showing of Mark's good side. And like you said, coming off of the conversation that he just had with Darkwing, I thought having him have to save the people of Atlantis from this Death Dweller just made it so much more profound, and like such a, like, where in the comic it's a fun kind of little moment and an issue, here it turns that into another good example and a moment for Mark to make that decision of, am I Omni-Man or am I invincible, right?
Right.
And again, just such a great change, but not a change. But yeah, I loved it. And like you said, anytime we get Mark fighting a kaiju is always a good day for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm trying to think. So we got Atlantis, and then I think the last thing that we really have to talk about is not end credit scene, but just end scene of the episode, I guess. But we get
Yeah.
another alternate universe, and we see mutated Levy talking to another Mark that's imprisoned. And then we get like a girl Cecil shows up and
Yeah.
all
And
this
Girl
stuff.
Donald.
Yeah, and Girl Donald. So what did you, the very quick scene, it kind of just, I would say more of like a teaser, but what did you
Yeah.
think about this little tease, Sean? Did it tease you?
Yeah. I mean, like they kind of set it up to be this big overarching threat of the season, but it's really sprinkled in, and it's kind of like more than the Lizard League thing, but along the same lines of it, where it's this slow burn kind of build to
Mhm.
him becoming this, like multiversal time hopping baddie. And I like it, just kind of adds more, because it's funny because really him becoming the way he is really his fault
Mhm.
in a way, but he blames Invincible, which I guess is fair, especially knowing what other Invincibles do, but also with him having the knowledge of this is the one that didn't, he's kind of, you know, he's on this like vengeance against all of them, it seems, and I'm really interested to see
Yeah.
where it goes. Um, but yeah, it's just adding a little more layers. It's like now the new Invincible title card. You see the cracks coming through, which I'm guessing is going to be like the whole multiversal Angstrom thing. That's like
Mhm.
definitely what it represents for sure. But yeah, I really like, and we talked a lot about Sterling K. Brown last episode and how he's great. So any more we get of that man voice acting his ass off, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go. There's one little thing I wanted to bring up that you mentioning the women version. There
Mhm.
was like a big thing with Donald because Donald died in season 1,
I
and
was
then
gonna.
Debbie sees Donald,
Yes.
and everyone's just acting like it's normal. And that is like another small like subplot going on under all of this. And it made me wonder, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know if I want to reveal it, but I think I heard of what he is in the comics. So I was like, oh, I
I
wonder if
was
we just
just gonna say that. Should I say like what it is, or
maybe we
should
should
we?
leave it. Maybe
I would
we
say,
should
should
leave
we
it.
leave that? I think we should
Yeah.
leave it.
It's a cool little mystery going
Yeah.
on. It may have gotten spoiled for me a little bit, but that's fine. I don't. To me, it's not a big deal because I think it's so cool and interesting. Of him kind of wondering, he's like, why did Debbie act so weird towards me? You know, like he has no idea. Like Cecil's acting like it's another day and nothing happened. But we
Mhm.
all know the dude got blown up.
Yeah, literally.
Well, blown up and like stabbed by the
Yeah,
yeah,
like
like right through the
xenomorph through the chest.
yeah by Omni-Man. So very
Yeah,
dead for sure.
dead,
So
dead.
yeah, I'm interested to see, and they maybe they'll change what I heard he is in the comics, but uh, I'm very interested in that plot line too.
Yeah,
For sure.
I am 100% with you on that, man. And like again, I know what happens to him in the comic, and just for fun, I'm not gonna. I know this is the after show breakdown and
Yeah,
all that, but we gotta leave some fun, right? So I
yeah,
won't
yeah, yeah.
spoil y'all, but I think without spoiling it, I think that there's a great opportunity for the show to make it a little different if they chose to.
Right,
Way
for
I
sure.
think where they have it in the comic is great. If that's the way they go, that's still awesome. But I do think that there is an interesting opportunity here to do something a little different with the Donald reveal. So I am not only invested in the mystery just along with you, but
Cool.
I'm interested to see how they play with that in future episodes. And I just love Donald. He's such a great character. He reminds me of Coulson from the
For
Marvel
sure,
universe. So I
for
feel like that's
sure.
I immediately just gravitated towards him because I'm just like, you're like Coulson. I love Coulson. But yeah,
Yeah,
I love Donald. I hope we get way more Donald moving forward.
me too. Me too. But yeah, the Angstrom thing is obviously a big thing. He seems like he's going to be one of the main antagonists for Mark going forward. But like I said, I'm interested to see how that comes about
Hmm.
because you kind of see maybe he's hopping through different realities and dealing with an invincible at a time or something. We don't really know what his plan is, and then that's
Yeah.
exciting.
I can't wait, man. I cannot wait to see how they tie all of these threads together, what else is going to be, revealed and or, re-examined, like, with the Martians and all that stuff. But to
Yeah.
end this off, I thought about this. I thought this would be a little bit of fun. To end off the episode, I want to ask you, Sean. So, if you could pick one thing from this episode, like we talked about, there's so much that's packed into these, but what was your favorite moment from this
Ooh.
episode, whether it's something that we talked about or maybe just like a quick little thing like Mark chopping the magnemites, you know what I mean? It could be anything.
I think it was a moment we didn't. I briefly talked about, but there's a moment where Mark comes home and Debbie's crying. And earlier in the episode,
Yes.
he gets mad when she says the thing about, you're not your father. And he's like, why'd you say it? And leaves.
Hmm.
And then she sees her like super hurting and he goes to like hug her, but sees him, you know, like a little beat up. You know what I mean? And I'm sure that's kind of like a PTSD thing with Omni-Man and Nolan for
Hmm.
sure. And at first she like holds him off and then lets him hug her. I thought that was like a really nice, like quiet moment. And I think that's been like my favorite thing in like superhero media as of late. Like the MCU has done like that's probably been my favorite things like post Endgame is whether if I like love everything they do, I think one thing they've been doing and shows like this and the boys do it to perfection because the writing is just so well done. But there's like so much that happens, but they still leave time for these like quiet character moments.
Hmm.
And those always like hit really hard for me. And I always like really appreciate those moments. They take the time to be like, here's a nice character beat. That's the stuff I love. I love that kind of stuff.
I love that stuff too, and I kind of want to steal your answer because that was one of my favorite moments too, and that's something that I forgot was in this episode. But I'm gonna not spoil anything, but this is one of my favorite moments from the 4 episodes that we watched. I really, like you said, I really love the more quieter moments. And again, this is I'm glad you brought this up because this is a topic I wanted to discuss a little bit, but we're getting to the end of the episode, so I'll make it quick. But going back to what we talked about last week and Debbie and like how they made her in the show a lot more like in charge of herself and her emotions and all that, like we talked about last week. In the book, she's very, very much like just distraught and like just you know beside herself over everything that happened. And like again, we see glimpses of this in the show of her drinking and stuff, but like in the book, she's like full on alcoholic. But this is the moment that I referred to in last week's episode. In the book, this scene kind of plays out very similarly, but Debbie's like coming at Mark, like, why, blah, blah, blah. And when he holds her, that's when she says the line that I mentioned in last week's episode. She's like, why did you have to fight him and make him leave? And like basically blaming Mark for what happened. And obviously in the show here, it plays out much differently, very differently. But again, that's why I loved this moment in the show so much, is because I think, like I was talking about last week, this, which I couldn't talk about last week yet because we didn't get there yet. But that moment of him, like you said, she holds him back first and then like, lets him in and all that. Such a great moment and a perfect example of the differences of Debbie from the books and Debbie in the show. And I think that they are just doing such a great job with her character specifically. It's like, I know the show's about Mark and the superheroes and all that stuff, but I love the human characters too. And like you said, allows us to really have those really great human and emotional moments that I think
for sure
from just your Saturday morning, superhero cartoon into something like we talked about in the beginning of this episode that is really a great form of storytelling and a way to, convey these emotions, even though it is an animation.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more with you there.
But I mean, for the sake of the game, though, I can't pick the same one that you pick. So for the sake of the game, I'm gonna go with the Darkwing star. I guess the Night Boy stuff. I really loved that. I love seeing Sad Boy or emo Mark and like him kind of delving into that darker side of him a little bit more. I love that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna go with the Darkwing as my favorite moment of the episode.
We could call him Bully Mark.
Ooh, Bully Mark. Yes. That's it. That's cut the check. Put it in the movie. I love it. Bully Mark. But Sean, I mean, this is so much fun, man. I can't thank you enough for doing this. And we are gonna for sure be back for episode 3, which you'll never hear a spoiler here from us and on this channel, but I will say it is a great episode, and I'm super excited to get back and talk to you about it. But before we get out of here, is there anything I think we nailed this one as far as going through the episode, but is there anything else you can think of that we didn't hit on or that you just want to mention real quick for the people at home?
No, I think we got this one. I think we got it.
Dude, nail in the coffin, done. We killed it. Again, Sean, I can't thank you enough for being here. If you guys watching and listening to this like this episode, please consider giving us a subscribe and a like. And also, if you got time, leave us a comment. We love comments. We love talking nerdy stuff. If you leave us a comment, you can leave one for Sean as well, and I'll relay it back to him, and we will answer you, I promise. But again, thank you all for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you stay hydrated. All your stacks are fat. And until next time, my friends.